Magandang araw ulit sa inyo mga kakrimnos. Okay, nandito na talaga tayo sa last part ng Police Intelligence and Secret Services, which is the third scope about the intelligence and its perspective, kung saan ay ating pag-uusapan ang tungkol sa intelligence cycle. Okay, talagang napaka-importante itong intelligence cycle na ito kasi dito lamang malalaman ng isang intelligence officer kung kailan talaga sila magkakandak ng information gathering. Diba? So dito natin malalaman kung ipupurso ba talaga nila ang pangangalap ng impormasyon na kung saan ay walang nangyaring criminality. Diba? Pero kapag nag-i-exist yung crime sa isang lugar, of course, ito ba ang oras or panahon na kailangan nilang magsasagawa ng information gathering? Diba? So dito natin makikita, meron tayong crime or event dito na kung saan ay talaga bang nangyayari itong isang crime na ito or krimen. Okay. Kapag bang nangyayari yung isang krimen ay binabaliwala na lang ba kapag wala silang nakikitang possible evidences and or information that would somehow link to the commission of crime or the existence of the crime. So, dyan yun papasok yung law enforcement agency. Kapag merong impormasyon na kanilang nakalap na talagang nangyayari ang isang krimen na ito o isang illegal activities of a particular individual or a group of individuals, ay magsasagawa sila ng evaluation and feedback. Diba? So, yun yung gagawin ng law enforcement agency. Kapag napag-alaman ng law enforcement agency, diba? Mamaya malalaman nyo kung ano yung mga law enforcement agency na yan. Kapag napag-alaman nila na talagang nag-i-exist yung crime or krimen, diba? Dito lamang sila magsasagawa ng evaluation at saka feedback na kung saan ay talaga bang ipagpatuloy yung information gathering or pagsasagawa ng investigasyon base sa kanilang initial na nakalap na mga informasyon na talagang nangyayari yung isang krimen na iyon. Okay, dito nila isasagawa yung evaluation. Kapag na-evaluate na talagang positive yung mga pangyayari, and that is the time that they will give a feedback that they should pursue this operation or investigation. So, yun yung mga bagay na ating pag-uusapan ngayon. Kasi saka lamang sila magpo-proceed to the first step or stage of the intelligence cycle kapag positibo na yung kanilang initial investigation. At dyan papasok si planning at saka direction. So, hopefully that you've got thrilled because I got thrilled also to start the discussion. And kindly prepare your pen and notes if you have some important notes to take down, and that is the time for you to take down notes so that you will not able to forget the things that we are going to discuss. Well, anyway, this is a pre-recorded and you will be able to revisit this presentation in this channel whenever you want to. Okay, so sit back, relax, grab your snacks together with your pen and your paper. And now we are down to the last topic of the third scope, which is the intelligence cycle. When we say intelligence cycle, of course, it has a beginning and end, meaning to say it has a proper communication from the first step up to the last step for its proper disposition. So now let's proceed to the next slide. Now try to look at this intelligence cycle. In this intelligence cycle, first, the crime or event must be determined first by the law enforcement agency. And who are these law enforcement agency? We have the following law enforcement agency. We have the PNP, PDEA, EFP, the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, and the National Bureau of Investigation. Why there's a need for the law enforcement agency to determine first the crime or event? Of course, in order for them to determine the crime or event, it must be evaluated and give the feedback on a particular crime and or event. How crucial is that? It is very crucial since it determines the existence of the crime and or the event. And that is for them to decide whether to continue the investigation and or not. Whenever the investigation will be continued, meaning to say that the crime or event has been existed. But if it will not be continued, or if the investigation will not be continued, meaning to say that their feedback or the evaluation is the crime or the event has never been existed. Whenever the law enforcement agency is very successful in the evaluation and feedback, meaning to say the crime or the event has been existed, and that is the time for them to proceed with the planning and direction. The planning and direction is very important since it identifies the PIR or the Priority Intelligence Report, or known before as EEI, or the essential elements of intelligence. What are these Priority Intelligence Report? In the Priority Intelligence Report, it includes the subject of the investigation and the area to be investigated. So, meaning to say these are the very first elements that should be determined first in order for them really to conduct actual operation and or actual investigation. Second one, in the planning and direction, they are going to conduct pre-surveillance conference. In the pre-surveillance conference, it is a time wherein all the concerned individual is sitting together in order to initiate the personal reconnaissance and artificial reconnaissance. And what is this personal reconnaissance and artificial reconnaissance? When we say personal reconnaissance, it is more on having the first step of letting the agent to observe first the area or the target area and the subject in order to verify the presence of the target area and or the subject. And on the other hand, we have this artificial reconnaissance. When we say artificial reconnaissance, it will be done during the pre-surveillance conference. Since in the artificial reconnaissance, there is no personal contact or personal observation to the area where the agent would conduct a pre-surveillance, but it is with the use of the map, so also known as map reconnaissance, wherein in the map reconnaissance and or the artificial reconnaissance, they are going to study the target area by determining the place, and of course familiarization of the place and or the building and or the terrain for that matter. And the third one is that verification of the target area, subject, and the possible resources. So meaning to say, how important is the verification of the target area? It is very important since they need really to determine the possible entrances and or the exits of the building whenever they are about to engage in the operation. And of course, the verification of the subject, because it is usually happened that they got the wrong person. And the possible resources. So talking about the possible resources, who are the person that could be used in the conducting of the surveillance and or the casing job? Okay. So right after having positive feedback on the first step, which is the planning and the direction, and this is the time that the law enforcement officer and or individual must proceed to the second step, which is the collection of information. In the collection of information, this is the crucial time since it involves actual engagement of an agent or actual operation of an agent. For what purpose under in this second step? This is for the purpose of looking for information network. So when we say information network, another thing is information resources or information sources. And it is also in this very stage in the application of the sources of information by means of initiating the regular sources, the cultivated sources, and the grapevine sources. What is the difference of the three? In the regular sources, it involves governmental and or non-governmental agencies. It could also be involved with the newspapers, the magazines, gathering information through televisions and or the radios and or internet. And also in the other aspect and or perspective of gathering data and or information. While in the cultivated source, it involves two forms, which is the informant and or the informer. So these particular two persons will be discussed latter part of this very stage. And the third one is the grapevine. The grapevine, these are those people as a source of information, could be an ex-convicts and or the prisoners. So why they are the people whom an agent should gather the data? Since they are very much familiar and aware of what is going on outside, and to whom they are going to have a direct communication in terms of criminal activities. And of course, the third is activates informant network or assets. And this is the very time that the agents should use assets and or informant in two forms, informant and or informer. This is what I am talking about a while ago, the difference between the informant and or the informer. In the intelligence perspective, the informant and or the asset has two forms, which is the plainly informant and the second one is the informer. The difference of the two is that when we say informant, these are those people who could provide information voluntarily without any consideration in a form of rewards and or money. And on the other hand, informer. When we say informer, they could be marginalized by the police officers and or the law enforcement agency in order to gather and collect data in order to aid their operation. So when we say informer, these are those who gave information to the law enforcement officer by means of reward and or any form of consideration. And the last, under which in the collection of information, the surveillance, casing job, elicitation, undercover operation, and etc. might be used and or utilized in the collection of information. Since the surveillance, it is in a form of conducting covert operation. So when we say covert operation, meaning to say the subject is unaware that he is being under surveillance. Like for example, conducting tailing and or shadowing. It is a form of foot observation or foot surveillance wherein the agent is following the subject with the application of different techniques such as AB technique, ABC techniques, wherein you could see a lot of interchange of positions whenever the agent is about to be burned out. And the next one is casing job. When we say casing job, it is a police term wherein it is a study or observation of a building as a form or as a area target of a particular operation and or investigation. So another term for casing is recon or reconnaissance. So the reconnaissance term is usually being used by the military troops. And the next one is elicitation. What then is elicitation? So when we say elicitation, it is a low form of interrogation wherein the agent conducts direct communication on the target or the subject without knowing on the part of the subject that he is under observation or investigation in a form of elicitation. Meaning to say, the agent would even have this opening a communication in order really to lure the subject to give more information pertaining to the subject matter that they are talking about. And the next one is undercover operation. Under this undercover operation, the agent assumes fictitious identity, or shall we say another identity for that matter, and that is for the purpose of not to be detected easily, meaning to say the agent is going to adapt a biographical information in order to hide its true identity. So these are the things that needs to be considered in the collection of information. So whenever the information has been collected, this is the time to proceed to the third step, and that is processing and evaluation. How important or essential is the processing and evaluation of information? This is very important because whenever the information will be processed and evaluated, and that is the time it will become intelligence. What is the difference between the information and the intelligence? The difference of the two is that when we say information, it talks about raw data, unprocessed and unevaluated. Meaning to say, hindi pa na proseso at hindi pa na i-evaluate. That is why it is called as information. But from the time that the data has been processed and evaluated, that is the time you call it intelligence. Under this very stage or step, which is the third step, right after the collection of information, it will undergo proper handling and storage of gathered data. Why the proper handling and proper storage must be initiated? It must be initiated since in the proper handling of the data, it must really be stored in the proper place wherein no one could access it except from the concerned authority or concerned individual. That is why we have here the principle, the need to know principle. Because in the need to know principle, in providing of data and or information, it is not giving the data information based on the position or based on the rank, but it is on the principle of knowing whom you are directed to disseminate or give or provide the data and or information. So that is very important. And the next one is must be communicated to the decision maker. And who is the decision maker? The decision maker will be the one to process and evaluate the data and or the information. And this is very crucial since from the time it will be communicated to the decision maker, the intelligence must become time bounded. So when we say time bounded, it is now really following the time frame to when it must be disseminated, because whenever the intelligence will be disseminated too soon and too late, the intelligence becomes useless. Why is that? Because whenever it will be communicated too soon, and that could not be used because the operation or the investigation will not start right away. But whenever it will be given or disseminated too late, of course that could not be used because the operation or the investigation has already been done, diba? So unless otherwise, the intelligence will be used in the strategic form of intelligence, because that could be used in the near future rather than line intelligence, because in the line intelligence it really needs right away, diba? So that is in a short-term application of such intelligence. And in the processing and evaluation, it must undergo selection process. How crucial is in the selection process? This is very crucial since it is somewhat like separating the grain from the shaft, meaning to say you are going to select the important from the unimportant. or shall we say, it is plowing the maze of information. So, plowing the maze of information, napakadami ng information which could not be used on the investigation or operation could be conducted. So that is the time that it must underwent selection process. And the last one under this stage is determining the reliability, accuracy, and the sources of information. As what we have discussed from the previous slide or presentation, the reliability there talks about the acronym of the COFNOR. Yeah. So in the COFNOR is completely reliable, unreliable, fairly reliable, not reliable, unreliable, and of course reliability cannot be judged. So those are the things which is under the reliability. And when we say accuracy, how accurate the information is, or how accurate the informations are in terms of classifying it, or in terms of interpretation, that will be done. The interpretation will be done in the next stage, which is in the fourth one. Diba? So in the accuracy kasi, we need to remember the acronym of the CPPDIT. CPPDIT, which is being represented with a numerical or the numbers. C stands for completely reliable, and of course probably true, possibly true, doubtfully true, and the either is that improbable, and T is truth cannot be judged. So these are the things to be considered under the processing and evaluation, because whenever in this very stage, which is the processing and evaluation, will not be successful, of course it might be the end of the operation, or might be the end of the investigation, because we cannot, or you cannot, or the agent cannot proceed to the fourth stage, which is the analysis and interpretation. So that is why the proper handling, the storage, the decision making, the selection process, determination of the reliability, accuracy, and the sources of information is very essential or important in this very stage, in order that it will be analyzed properly and interpreted what type of intelligence that a particular agent had possessed. So since we're done with the third step of the intelligence cycle, let's proceed to the fourth one. Which is analysis and interpretation. Under this stage, it must underwent a process of analysis, integration, and deduction. Okay, so underwent the process of analysis, integration, and deduction. So talking about analysis, of course, as what we have discussed a while ago, that it is a gathering of all information that had been collected, but it happens already that it became intelligence. And when we say integration, from selection on the part of the analysis, in the integration, that is the time to collate or to integrate all the important data that had been gathered. And in the deduction, this is very important since it involves theoretical conclusion. So meaning to say, it is the time to give the conclusion whether the intelligence must be disseminated or must not be disseminated, whether the intelligence is of useful or not of use. And the next one is time to classify the documents based on the contents and or intelligence value. Meaning to say, classification or classifying the documents based on the contents and or intelligence value is of its usage, whether it will become or considered to be top secret, confidential, and restricted. Of course, the top secret, confidential, and restricted documents has different contents and or intelligence value. So when it will be disseminated or given to a particular individual, it must be determined first what type of intelligence or document should be given to a concerned authority or concerned individual. So if the analysis interpretation is very successful, that is the time to proceed with the fifth stage, which is the dissemination. So in the dissemination, it is the time to evaluate if the intelligence to be disseminated is of concern of a particular law enforcement agency and or of in the proper position if it will be given to the law enforcement agency. Because in the dissemination, as what's stated here, it should be disseminated to the concerned department and or agency. So in the dissemination, so the intelligence to be given to the law enforcement agency must be best suited to the nature of their job or to the nature of their operation, such as an intelligence which involves narcotics and or the illegal drugs transaction. Of course, it might be the concern of the PNP and or the PDEA. And if it involves terrorism, it might be the concern of the AFP and or the NICA, and of course the NBI for that matter. So to sum up with, the intelligence cycle is very important, and of course that it needs to determine first the crime and or the event by the law enforcement agency. In order for the law enforcement agency to determine that, it must be first evaluated and to give a feedback. And that is the time to proceed with the first stage, the planning and direction, because in the plan and direction, it is where the question to be answered is determined, such as who is the subject, where is the target area to be located, and the next one is the collection of information, because in the collection of information, it is where the data that can answer the question that is gathered. And the third is processing and evaluation. So this is the very stage wherein the agent should process, evaluate the importance of the data, separating the important from the not important. And the fourth one is analysis and interpretation, because the analysis is the key step. This is where the processed data is synthesized into an answer. And the next one is dissemination. In the dissemination it is where the analyzed data now become intelligence. So remember the difference between the information and the intelligence. Information is the raw data, and whenever it will be processed and evaluated, it will become intelligence. So intelligence meaning to say processed and evaluated data. So the analyzed data is shared with relevant stakeholders. Then right after in this stage, the dissemination, of course, it will be given to the law enforcement agency. That law enforcement agency must determine or even give their feedback. So the law enforcement agency considered to be the stakeholders, or stakeholders return feedback on whether the question was answered. So meaning to say, with all the data has been gathered with a cycle of intelligence, that is the time that they are going to initiate the operation and or the investigation, since they have all the data and information that they have gathered. So that concludes the topic of the third scope or of the intelligence investigation. So yun nga, hopefully meron na naman kayong natutunan sa presentation sa araw na ito, and magagamit nyo sa inyong mga klase, di ba? Most especially sa panahon na ito, we don't have really a face-to-face classes. Instead, we have a Others would have a modular type of classes, would have a remote and distance learning setup of classes, and others would have a online classes. So this is very helpful, di ba? Sa mga nangangailangan talaga ng discussion parte sa topic na to. So this is the end of the part 3-D, all about the fourth all about the third scope, which is the intelligence and its perspective. So next presentation that will be posted is the fourth scope. This is not a third scope, this is a fourth scope. The next topic soon that will be posted. This is all about the information and its sources. So ating pag-uusapan dito sino si informant? Okay? Sino-sino ang mga informant? Sino-sino itong mga procuring agents? Anong ibig sabihin ng approach at saka probes at saka iba pang pag-uusapan natin, di ba? So, kailan natin matatawag na informant ito? Kailan natin matatawag na informer? Pero kailangan yung pag-isipang mabuti that in the intelligence perspective, there are two types of informant. Kasi pag sinabi natin informant, it refers to an asset those who give an information, di ba? So it's just a teaser na wherein informant composed of two types, the informant at saka informer. Okay. So the next presentation for this, you'll be able to know further who are these informant or these following topics under the information and its sources. So have a great day. God bless you all, and hopefully that you've learned a lot or a bit for today's presentation.